Here's a highly debatable study that was done at Stanford University saying that there's not much difference between conventional and organic food. Now, how can they say that there's not much difference? Wouldn't common sense tell you that anything that has hormones and endocrine disruptors and carcinogens and neurotoxins, in other words, poison, coating our food, might have some bad effects?
I like the way that the studies were done that showed that. It's a Hatchet job by Stanford University and by the Annals of Internal Medicine where this was published. And the study that was done, Mike Adams did a great expose on it. I suggest people go to naturalnews.com and have a look at what he wrote, because it really tells the story in great detail.
About some of the conflict of interest.
For sure. He points out particularly there's a fellow named Ingram Olkin, who's a well-known PhD, who is a professor of statistics at Stanford University, who also collaborated with the tobacco industry a few years ago, trying to convince us that tobacco wasn't bad for us. It wasn't proven, so therefore we shouldn't. So he's got a reputation for being dishonest.
And then there's some wealthy corporations that are in favor of pesticides and genetically engineered food.
Because they make a lot of money from it.
Yeah, paying a lot of money for this research that's being done at the university.
Right, and a lot of the research money that's coming in to Stanford University in the way of donations is not disclosed by Stanford University, something to the tune of $500 million. So you know that something's going on there that they're trying to hide. So I think it's great that Mike Adams exposed it, and I'd like to expose it with Vicki here with you all, so you get the idea that this kind of thing is happening.
And when you think about food that has pesticides on it, particularly food that's small, like berries and beans and things like that, it's almost like you take these strawberries and the other berries and dip them in poison and then take them out. It's the same thing with coffee beans. So when you do that, it's almost like it has more pesticides than if you took something large and dipped it in. And how would you like it if you had some of your friends invited you over for dinner, and you go over there for dinner and you're having your first course, you're having some salad, and they pass the Raid and spray Raid on your salad. You would just be irate.
Yeah, but if it comes that way, it's okay, right? See, some of the stuff that Dr. Marcia Angel published, she was the chief editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, which is probably the most prestigious medical journal that we have. And she, being the chief editor of it and being with the journal for 20 years, finally came out with a book that talked about how the research that was coming across her desk and getting into the journal was not research that was honest. And that really points out, as do some of the chief editors of other journals, like the Journal of Clinical Investigation and the Journal of the American Medical Association. It tells you that a lot of the research that gets in there is in there because of conflicts of interest and connections. So we have to pay attention to what's being visualized here and elucidated so we can see the real truth of what's happening. In this particular study, they had thousands of articles to choose from that were in the medical literature. They selected only 237 that they thought met their standards, whatever they were. Then of those, only 17 were on humans, and only 3 had evaluations that were clinical as far as an outcome is concerned. That's not a great cross-section of articles to look at from the point of view of making sure that we're being honest about what's presented. You have to trust the authors, and I don't.
The other thing that's going on is that we talk about organic foods and how they're not good for our environment, and they're not good for the animals either if they're not organic. And the food that's not organic has hormones, which I already mentioned, but they also have antibiotics and other things in there that are not a good idea. And a lot of these antibiotics are helping and adding to the problem of antibiotic resistance. And they're in the soil, and they get in the water, and we drink the water, and we're
next thing you know, you have methicillin-resistant staph or some other superbug that you don't want.
Another thing to be aware of is that most of the pesticides are in dairy and animal products.
80% of your pesticide load comes from that. So there's a lot that we have to pay attention to here. Now, the other thing is that we really want to make sure that what we do is take a look at how this article was presented, because it's very clever. they don't come out with hard statistics to convince you of anything. They give you a little bit of leeway in terms of saying, well, it's not good for the soil, it's not good for the environment, and it may be that there are higher levels of pesticides, but they kind of downplay it.
And they pass the safety levels.
Yeah, one of them, but if they have hundreds, which they do, by the time you have a meal that's got 4 or 5 vegetables or
and you don't
fruits,
just eat one pea.
No, so they all come together and they work in a way that is synergistic. So, for example, if you look at DDT and its effect on breast cancer, it may cause a rise of a certain percentage, we'll say 1 unit. If you look at DDE, which is a derivative of it, it too causes 1 unit. But you put them together and the amount of cancer you get is 4 times as much. So if you have 25 or 50 or 100 or 500 in what you consume in a day because you're having many different kinds of foods, you've got something here that's a major problem.
But a lot of people say, that we are not allowed to use DDT anymore. However, we're allowed to buy food from other countries that has DDT on it, that we sell the DDT to them.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And then we get it that way anyway through the back door.
Right. So the whole point of this is what Stanford has done and the Annals of Internal Medicine has done is present a case that makes you question what's going on. But in reality, what they're doing is a hatchet job saying, well, organic food really doesn't have much in the way of toxicity. It doesn't seem to have much more in the way of nutrition or more vitamins or nutrients. But that's not true.
Also, just to remember that life is about choices. And not long ago, we were talking about the Environmental Working Group's lists of the dirty dozen plus. Those are produce that are most contaminated. And then the clean, the good ones. Yeah. And so it's a good idea to think of those when you're buying things, because sometimes maybe they don't have the choice of something organic, or maybe you don't have enough money to buy the organic or what have you. So a few of the things that are the dirty in that dirty dozen to just be aware of are things like apples and peaches and celery and strawberries, things, bell peppers, things like that. And some of the foods that are in the clean
relatively
group,
clean,
the clean group, would be things like onions and pineapple and
avocado
and asparagus,
and cabbage. Those are the good ones.
So
you
keep
have
those in mind when you're buying food.
Anyway, don't be dissuaded by this particular article. It even made it to the New York Times, which doesn't say much for the New York Times either.
But it's because it was Stanford University.
It may be. So there are conflicts of interest here that are huge. Let's not get fooled by them, and let's make sure that we continue to eat food that doesn't have hormones, antibiotics, pesticides, hormone disruptors, and neurotoxins in it, because they're obviously not very healthy for us.